Hey guys, Phil Baumhard here. So for today's video, I've got a Swedish style of long Seax here that I'm trying to finish up on the sheath for. And so what I'm going to do today is just show you how I make the hardware for doing the suspension system for one of these. So this is going to be a horizontal suspension system, much like the historic finds that go along with knives like these. And from my understanding is that those are typically cast. Usually out of like bronze or brass or copper. Now, I could be mistaken on that, but the method that I use, it looks historically accurate, but it's made out of a bunch of simple components that you can just get at your local hardware store. So let's get going on this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to make here is the little copper plate that everything's going to hang off of. So I've got a little paper pattern drawn out. That's what it will look like right there. And I've got some copper plate. This I bought is kind of like just a craft sheet, but you can also buy copper fittings for plumbing. Cut that in half and use this for making your fittings out of. This is also usually available in thicker gauge of copper. I don't know exactly what the gauge is on this, but it's pretty thin, which in some respects can make it easier to work with, and in other respects actually makes it a little bit harder. Anyways, we'll trace this out. Since it's so thin, it can be hard to cut with the hacksaw, so you really got to make sure it's braced good and tight. It really wants to move all over the place. But it cuts easy. Just got to make sure it's braced. Okay, there we go. So now to cut out the indent here, what you could do is use files. I've done that before. Use round files and half round files to, just remove all that material. But it's a little more time consuming, so I'm going to try using the drill just to expedite the process and give me a little less work to do. This is a 1/4 inch drill bit, so we'll see what it does. Okay, so we got those holes drilled, and we'll just see if we can, yeah. So this is thin enough that we can just snip it out with the diagonal cutters. Yep. You can also use these in lieu of a hacksaw to cut out the entire shape, but sometimes when cutting it from the straight sheet, you gotta do some bending back and forth. So let's see if we can clean this up. So again, you could use some files, but I've got a little Dremel tool, so we're gonna just see if we can sand that out quick and easy. I've got a little Dremel sanding barrel on here. This isn't an actual Dremel tool. It's a Lil Crafty off-brand Dremel, but it'll get the job done. Okay, there we go. And I'll use this to neaten up the edges as well, but for now we're just doing that center cutout. So on this one I've got my double cut half round file, and I'll just show you how this one works. It takes a little bit longer, but you get the idea. Get a little more. Okay, there we go. So it's this thin copper, really not hard at all. So actually, you can see the one I did with the Dremel is a little more lopsided. I mean, that's just from drilling it, but with the file, that's actually fairly even. So let's hit this side with the file here and see if we can neaten it up a bit. Okay, and at the base of the indent, I'm also going to put a little divot for my my ring to sit. So we'll get out the round files, and there's a round needle nose file. And then at the base of that circle, just file a little divot in. Something like that is what we're looking for. Got another small round file here. I'm just going to enlarge that a little bit. That gives it a little more gradual shape there. Okay, there we go. So now it's really thinned down, but that's okay. That is what we are looking for here. So let's clean up these edges, and then we'll fold it into its final shape. I'm going to be using the my work sharp here. Again, you can do this with files, but since I've got the electronic tool, I'm just going to use that. Just helps make it a little bit easier. And then I'll just go over the entire exterior surface with this as well. Okay, so that'll be our outside. This will be our inside. Now we can bend that around into place. And I'll just use my Leatherman, grab that in the middle like that, and we'll just bend it over. And you can see, because the plier jaws have got a taper, that this tapers as well. So we'll switch it over to this side there and complete that up. But there you have it. So that's fairly even, and so that will slip right over the leather, and then we can we'll be able to compress that down. Okay, so now that we got both of these done, I'll fit these on here, and to my aesthetics, the where it squares off here, as long as it lines up with the top edge of the welt, I'm happy there. So something like that is about what I'm looking for. So I'll mark with the Sharpie about where I need my holes to be drilled. So I want to go through the stitching, so I'm thinking low, right about there. Something like that will look good. I've done it where I've tried to line it up with the holes of the stitching, but it's just easier this way. So if you got the leeway, just put it below the stitching, so that way you don't risk cutting it. And so now what I'll do is I'll drill out those holes. So I'm going to be using to secure the copper to the sheath is these brass escutcheon pins. Same thing I used for the Scottish Dirk videos, if you saw those. That needs a 1/16 inch drill bit. And so what I'll do is I'll brace this. I'll put a few layers of leather in here just to give this a body, and I'll drill that out. Got a 1/16 inch drill bit. Okay, we're through both of them. Okay, so we're through on both sides. So we'll put that on our sheath here. We got the holes through there, and we'll line up and we'll just get the pins through there. Okay, there we go. Got them both through. Now that we got both the pins through, we'll just go in and snip those down. You don't want to leave too much or too little sticking up, just like Goldilocks. It's got to be just right. Get that on our anvil there. And we'll very carefully just tap that down. So that still looks like there's just a little bit too much hanging out. And if you're basically what we're doing is making a rivet, and if that's too long, the whole rod will just bend and warp inside of the leather, and that's no good. So nice and easy, we'll get that started with the flat of the hammer. Switch over to the peen. Nice and easy, take our time is the name of the game. So that one looks good, so let's get that other one. That looks good, that's secure on there. I'm happy with that. Okay, and if you got one of these Dremel tools, you can also get these little mini Scotch-Brite wheels. And I like to use these just to kind of clean it up and put that factory looking polish back on there. So these things are actually very abrasive, and they really do a good job of just polishing this stuff down. So you can see that does a good job of just cleaning that all right up. So we'll go ahead and get that second one on there. And now for the suspension rings, I'm just going to use some copper wire. Fortunately, I don't know what the exact gauge of this is. This is some stuff from a electrician buddy of mine. Shout out to Scott if you're watching. So we'll cut off a bit of this. What I like to do is just fold it in half, just because it's easier to keep together. And then I'm going to just clamp this down to the bench here. Then I'll just take my drill, grab those two ends, and so depending on how tight you want the braid, that's how many twists you let go on the drill. And something like that ought to do it for me. And so now to make this into a ring, you got to find something round of about the right diameter that you want. So for me, this is actually the gobo arm of my C-stand, and if you're a filmmaker, you'll know what that means, but for everybody else, that's okay. But I just find something round, and wrap it around nice and tight, just by hand, nothing fancy to it. And now I can pull that off, and there you go. I should be able to get 2 rings out of that. Okay, so here's our rings, and we'll just neaten these up with the cutters. Okay, there we go. 2 rings. And the next step here is to put them onto our scabbard. And so if you're making these yourself, you can just, with your pliers, just butt those 2 ends up against each other and call it good. And that should suffice for you just fine. You put your toggles through there, and you've got a working sheath. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to solder these 2 ends together. So it's fairly simple to do. So if soldering is new to you, hopefully you'll find this informative. But if you know anything about plumbing and home maintenance, so on and so forth, this will be kind of old news for you. And if I screw up some of the information, you're feel free to let me know down in the comments and give me a gentle correction. Okay, so all you really need is a little propane fuel with a torch. I mean, this is like, $10. The fuel is $3, and then you'll need some silver solder and paste. And again, that's like, $5 to $7, something like that. Very cheap. Just get it in the plumbing section of your hardware store. So first thing that I'm going to do here, that I've found works the easiest for me, is I'm going to just pre-cut off a little bit of the solder. I'm going to use my pliers to get that into place. So I'll stage that here off to the side. And don't know where I got my striker, but I'm just going to use my Zippo here. Don't need too much. So we're going to preheat our copper here. So that should be good. Get some flux on there. Whoa! That's a lot of flux. Is that right? You see that kind of evaporating there. This is probably just too hot. Yeah, that's too hot right now. There we go. So starting to bubble. Perfect. That's what we want. Hit that again. Just drop our solder. And that should be good. So that's not the prettiest job, but I think that'll do. So on this other one, I'll do a close-up for you. Now ideally, at least in plumbing, you're supposed to put the solder in from the other side and the heat will draw it in. I probably got a little too close on that, and if you get too close, it seems to push the solder around. But for this, it's going to work just fine. Now I'm not going to touch that because that's super hot. We'll start with our preliminary heat. There we go. Get some flux on there. There we go. Let's see if we can light this from underneath. And here's our solder. Yeah, you can see that kind of get drawn in. Left that on there a little too long, my mistake. kind of got away from me there. And you can see it's sort of spread. I'll see if I can clean some of that up. I'm not going to touch it right now. The important thing is that these are on nice and solid. So it takes a while for those to cool down, but if we go to this first one, if I grab that with my fingers, I can't move that. That's nice and strong. That's probably the strongest part of the whole thing. And you can see even on this one, you know, some of that solder just got in between the little cracks. And it doesn't bother me. I think it looks cool. Just adds to it, you know, that kind of the copper and silver look. But that's good to go. On that other one, we'll see if we can polish that up with the buffer. And if not, we'll just cut it off and try it again. Yeah, so the little buffing wheel there cleans it up. Not a problem. And yeah, that one's solid as well. So, and believe it or not, this was a clean workbench when I started. Alright, well there's what our sheath is looking like. The rings are securely on there. And so for our historic finds, this is really how we find them. Basically just the sheath. And we have the rings. A lot of them actually have 3 rings. I'm just going with 2 on these. And so that kind of leaves the question of the suspension system up for interpretation. So I make some what I call jesses out of leather, but what we don't find is another attachment point on here. So the people that make a strap that's permanently attached to this, like a belt loop strap, that's not actually historically accurate. Nothing wrong with it, but I just haven't seen any evidence to back that up. So the strap system that I make is conjecture, but I do, in my mind, feel that it is highly possible that's how the Vikings actually carried their knives around. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I got my leather here. This is some 6-ounce leather, so it's a little bit thinner than what I normally use for the sheaths and all that, but that's what you want, is the thinner stuff, so 6 to 4 ounce. I've got a pattern for my toggle, so we'll just lay that down and trace it out. This other one's actually going to be a little bit shorter. And using the edger like this just helps kind of keep everything looking neat, looking professional. You can also remove the pen lines. I made sure to do this on the back side of the leather, but still doesn't look good to leave that on there. And then we're going to cut 2 slits in this top portion here for the toggle. So I've already got a hole in the paper. That just gives me kind of a guide. Okay, and then once the slits are cut, we're going to just take the other end and feed it through the 2 slits like this. You can see I've got the end through there. Grab hold of that and pull it through. And so here, at about this point, you want to start rolling up the toggle before you really cinch it tight. So the tighter the roll that you can get on that, the better. There we go. Let's pull that. There. So with the leather dry like this, that's about as good as you'll get. So I'll take my pliers pinch it in there and just sort of try to tighten it up. And to really get this secure, I'll just sort of dip this in some warm water. Just one little dunk like that. You don't need to go overboard in the soaking, because this is just going to just soak up any moisture real fast. So just get this as tight as you can, and when it dries, the leather is going to shrink a little bit and it'll get even tighter, and it'll harden up as well, so you have a real hard stiff toggle, and there's no risk of it ever coming undone. Once this dries, I'll put some neat soot oil on here to stain the leather. But you don't want to, don't put the neat soot oil on too soon. Like right now, already the leather is starting to dry out a little bit. Don't put it on now because you'll have a color difference in there. But that one's good to go, so now I'll just do this one. Alright, there we go. 2 toggles. Now we just need to add some slits right here that the toggle end will feed through, and then these things will be complete. So I'm going to use this leather punch here just to give me a hole, just as a base point. And I have a fairly wide chisel that I like to use. It gives me a long enough cut, and it keeps it straight. And I'll just give it a nice termination point. There we go. And the holes also just help keep the leather from tearing out. So with this, it's wide enough that you can feed the other end through. And I've got a whole separate video about how the suspension system works. But there you go. So this will go through the belt, and then the knife will hang off of this end here. Okay, so these things are dry, so I'm going to just oil these up. So since the rest of the sheath I used linseed oil on, I'm going to use linseed oil on here. And I just use my fingers to apply it. Now if you're using the boiled linseed oil, which I don't recommend, I like using the raw linseed oil, but if you're using the boiled, make sure you don't get it on your hands, because my understanding is that there's gasoline and other stuff in there that if you touch it with your skin, it'll make you nauseous and make you feel sick for quite a while. So but the pure raw linseed oil is basically just like flaxseed oil, so it's safe to touch with your hands. A little goes a long way on these. I wouldn't dip them in it because that would just be too much, I think. I'll also use neat soot oil on leather like this. It gives it a little bit more of a red hue. The linseed oil, of course, has got a little more yellow to it, but it still actually has quite a bit of red. Okay, there we go. And when the weather permits, I like to leave these out in the sun. Just helps that oil just sort of penetrate deeper, and you get a better color with less coats. But 1 coat should really be all I need on these, possibly 2. We'll see how light they dry. Okay, so here's what the finished straps look like after the linseed oil is all dried on here. And the way that these attach onto the belt is you just take the toggle, run it through the slit that we've made, just like that, and then you pull that tight, and so now those are on there. And you notice that we got one of these shorter than the other, and the handle end of the knife is going to go on the short one, so that way this is angled slightly with the handle up, so that way it's going to be harder for the knife to fall out, but that's why you have the sheath that encompasses the whole handle, so it's not going to be a problem. And the way that these attach is you just sort of roll the strap over like that, and then get that through the ring, and there you go, now it's on there. So it's fairly easy to take on and off. You don't need to undo your belt to remove the scabbard of the knife, and there's really no way that that's going to accidentally fall off of there. You really got to twist it over and pull that through. So I really like this system. I think it looks good. I believe it's fairly historically accurate. I mean, there's nothing that proves it, but nothing that disproves it, because of all the historical finds. There's nothing that indicates that they had another attachment here with a fixed strap. So it keeps the scabbard nice and clean. You can take it off these straps and you can have this you know, in a pack, or you know, on display somewhere in your house, and then when you want to wear it, this is a nice easy system. You can have multiple straps on multiple belts or different carry systems or packs. So overall, I like this system. I don't see anybody else doing it quite this way. So if you got your own idea for a Viking knife that you're looking for and you want this kind of sheath system, you know, get a hold of me and we'll see if we can make this for you. But other than that, this knife is all done. Okay, so here's what the knife looks like on the belt. So you can see it suspends horizontally really nicely, and you know, you could shorten this. You could use a shorter strap on this side here if you really wanted this at an angle where the knife wouldn't fall out, but you know, in a lot of the artwork of the time, you see these knives, you know, basically horizontally at the front of the belt, not at the back, but you could wear it at the back or the side or whatever the heck you wanted to do with it. So there's a lot of versatility with this type of design. So this knife is going to be up for sale on my Etsy web store if anyone's interested in purchasing it. It's forged out of a coil spring. It's got an ash handle and a little copper cap at the end. So this is a fairly historically accurate knife. The ash wood is accurate to the Viking period, and of course has the connection with Odin. And it's a really nice wood grain. These things look really nice. And basically all I'm doing with these is such a dark wood. All I'm doing is putting linseed oil on here, so it's not even, I'm not even putting artificial stain or anything like that. So really nice knife. And this is similar to a lot of the Swedish Rus finds. Actually, I'm calling this knife the Shield Maiden because this type of knife was found with the warrior burial that you know, the last couple of years was discovered that it was actually a female that was buried in that grave, and she had a knife like this along with a sword and a bunch of other weapons. So I'm calling this a Shield Maiden because it sounds cool. But so if you're interested in buying this knife, hit up the Etsy web store. And if you're making your own Viking knives and you're working on sheaths, hopefully you found this video useful, maybe gave you some ideas for your own projects. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, be more Viking.